Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Behind the Tool Belt. On my left side here, I have the beautiful Becca Switzer with Sales Mastery. We are in Orlando Roofing Process Conference. Thank you, Dimitri, for hosting a beautiful conference. So far, so good in the sunshine state of Orlando. I think it was like 80 degrees this morning when I walked across here. So I did not have to work out because I considered the steps that I took over here, packing this shit up and walking back over there tonight as a full workout. So don't hate me for not doing my workout this morning. But anyhow, God bless you all. Becca, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm super excited to be here. This is one of my favorite industry events.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's been very cool. We met a lot of cool people, some new friends, some old friends. Patrick Carr's here, who's one of my favorite podcasters.
Great content.
Yes,
love that guy.
Always.
Yeah.
I actually did a 60-day content challenge with him.
Nice.
Yes. So he was doing his little Patrick Carr show. I don't even know what the topic was, but then he started to talk about like this. Hey, does anybody want to join a 60-day content challenge, which was a private Facebook group? There was like 200 of us in it. I want to say 12 of us actually did it for 60 days in a row. And he came up with a topic every morning.
Yeah.
So I'd hurry up, wait, I'd turn it on. He'd have a topic. So we'd have to talk about it for 2 minutes. That was it. So not live, just recorded. So like the first 2 weeks, it was so horrible. Like I would go 5 minutes, I would do 30 seconds. I'm like, dude, how do you keep it within like 2 minutes, like 120 seconds? I got better at it and it was actually good. And I really feel like it had helped me do things like this, like just to get in front of a camera, listen to myself because I can't stand my voice and kind of like get over that hump. So big shout out to Patrick Carr for the 60-day content challenge, which was like a year ago. Roofer's here. Becca's here. I mean, the whole crew is here. Like
Sumo Quote.
Yeah, Sumo Quote's
Malarkey,
here. Yeah.
CSS, Contractor Supplement Solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyhow, typically when people come on, a lot of times we plug what they do. We get their backstory. We talk about all kinds of different things. But Becca, I feel like a lot of people haven't really heard about your backstory. Like tell us how you became the woman that you are. Like, why do you do the things that you do today? Like your experiences, good and bad experience that has molded you into the woman that you are today.
Trauma.
Yeah. Right.
Well, so how deep do you want to go?
I mean, as deep as you want it to go.
Okay. So I was born in Newfoundland, Canada.
Oh, okay.
I actually had a really interesting childhood. So my mom has borderline personality disorder. And if you don't know anything about that, it's one of the cluster B personality disorders.
Okay.
So it's really directly linked to narcissism and just like craziness. So I grew up in a kind of a circus. My mom actually made my entire family, like me, my brother, my dad, leave our country. So we moved away from Canada. And so I didn't have any contact with my grandparents, my cousins. I had no family, really. Yeah, it was an interest of just a lot of, so borderlines have, it's like narcissism, but a lot of manipulation, a lot of misdirected rage. So weird punishments all the time. And then my dad was a family physician. So he most of the time wasn't there until late at night, he'd come home from work. So I actually had a really tumultuous childhood. But I remember being conscious enough to think in my head, like, this probably isn't normal. I don't think this is normal. So as an adult, I mean, I haven't spoken to my parents now in like 9 or 10 years or something like that. But it kind of forced me to do gain a lot of self-awareness because I had to recognize patterns that weren't normal and like also recognize how other people aren't like that. You have to really teach yourself because when you're a kid and you grow up in those, it was honestly like a crash course as a young person into psychology because I had to prepare myself all the time for like what could happen next. What is she probably thinking? Like what could happen? So I think it actually benefited me greatly for my sales career because I had to learn about like what people are thinking, what could happen next. And I always have to be steps ahead of what is this person going to do? Sorry if that's dark, but that really is kind of how it's
kind of what I was digging for because like certain episodes or certain things happen over the course of the years, at least for me, that has made me the person that I am today, whether it be my threshold for pain is much higher than most people, which I feel looking back now is an unfair advantage that I might have over most entrepreneurs, fathers, brothers, aunts, uncles, whatever it is that I do. My tolerance for pain is much higher than most people because of the trauma, some self-inflicted, some not self-inflicted, that I've put myself through over the years has really molded me into not calloused or cold-hearted, but maybe more empathetic for people. So tell us some more about that.
So, well, honestly, I think that experience, even though it was such a huge chunk of my life, honestly, the experience that I had that helped me to grow as a person was when I got divorced. So long story made short. So I was 19 when I met my former husband. I had never even been in a relationship before. It was the first person I dated. I got married when I was 21, and we were together for a total of 8.5 years. And I actually was very unhappy in my marriage. He was 8 years older than me. We grew apart really fast. Didn't have very much in common. And for 6.5 years, I wanted to leave, but I felt like I didn't have, like, it wasn't an option. Like, divorce was not an option. So there a lot of guilt, I think, surrounding that. And I just felt like, well, this is the choice I made. Like, I'm stuck here. And so when I finally did make the move, my entire world fell apart. Like, this was for literally a year, and this is not exaggeration. When I would start to wake up in the morning, it was like, when your eyes are still closed, but you're stirring awake, I would immediately panic. It was like anxiety, like an elephant just sitting on my chest right away. And I couldn't, if I didn't have a dog at that time, I probably would not have gotten out of bed. It was really, really difficult. And I couldn't figure it out either. I was like torturing myself with, do I feel this way because I made the wrong decision? Or is it guilt? So if I didn't force myself to go through so much personal development at that time, I probably wouldn't have made it out. Like, it was a really dark time, but I learned through that so many skills that now I can speak about with authenticity. We were talking about earlier how cliches just kind of don't have any substance when people give them to you. Like, just smile.
Yeah.
From Patrick Carr, I learned a video that he had posted one time. He's like, next time you're super stressed about something, put on the cheesiest, force yourself to put on a big smile and think about that thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you do that, instantly your physiology is forced to change. So even if you're resisting, like, I'm going to get out of bed, it's like, smile, doing things like that. Or when they say, trust the process, or there's more to be revealed, all of those things, when people say them and you don't have an experience that you forced yourself to learn through how to get through, they kind of feel empty. You're like, thanks a lot for the advice.
Yeah.
But once you go through something truly like heartbreaking or traumatizing, your capacity, if you take advantage of those opportunities of pain. I've had my best creative projects during that time. I feel that grief helps you access wisdom if you let it. So one of the things I always tell myself is it's okay to feel stressed, depressed, down, heartbroken, disappointed, whatever. Just don't get stuck there.
Yes.
Even if you have to feel it every day, even if it's every 5 minutes, you have to cry. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to smile. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to clean my room. I'm going to walk my dog or do something. And then maybe you have a breakdown 5 minutes later. And it's like, it's okay. I'm just not going to get stuck here again. And you repeat that until it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, one day. You know?
It's almost, and to use another cliche, would be like act as if.
Exactly. I talked about that in my talk yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Act as if, put a smile on your face, even though you're not happy.
Right.
And this too shall pass. Like, there's so many of them. Somebody said something to me one time and I was like, this is the most stupidest thing I've ever heard. But I was stressed out and they're like, well, you're blessed for the stress. And I was like, I'm not going to say exactly what I said. I was like, that is the stupidest thing that I have ever heard in my life. I'm blessed for the stress.
Nothing.
Yeah, like, are you kidding me? My blood pressure's through the roof. I'm like, I'm ready to kill people. Like, why am I? Well, then I walked away and it was like a day later. And like, I'm like, I don't know why I thought of it. I was like, blessed for the stress. And it's like, well, yeah, like like most of which this stress I'm experiencing are all good things that have been placed in my life
Yes.
in order to benefit me and others. And I allowed myself to get overwhelmed. But like without that stress, I probably wouldn't have all of these things. Like
Right.
it started to click with me. And sometimes it takes a minute to digest or register exactly what somebody said to me for it to make sense to me. And it's like now I use that all the time for myself. Like, well, I'm blessed for this.
Yeah.
And then another one we like to use is like, oh, poor Becca. Poor Ty, stressed out. And it's like the
Right.
things, yeah, I'm stressed out. We got to be out of here by 9:00 tonight. But it's like, isn't that like we're our own worst critics at
Right.
times? At least for me, I will beat myself up. And we were talking about like that third party person that's over here always telling me that I'm not good enough or,
Right.
you don't deserve these good things. And it's
Yeah.
like, what's crazy is, and I don't know if I'm psychotic or crazy or not, but it's like challenge accepted. I can't do this. Tell me I can't do this.
Right.
It's like I'm having like these different conversations in my mind.
I think also that voice really highlights where our true insecurities are, because we talked about earlier when that third voice comes into the picture. And it's like, for example, yesterday I told you when I gave my speech, I was like, the whole time, for some reason, normally I'm so comfortable on stage or like delivering a message, but this one, and maybe it was because I took a different angle and it was a little bit more of a vulnerable story that I felt different. But it was like that, whatever that voice was, the whole time was just like people, they're wondering what the fuck you're doing up here,
Yes.
And I was like, why am I thinking that? It's so weird. But then we use the example of like, if I'm in the gym and that voice kicks in where it's like, you don't need to do this. Like, you should just quit now. You worked out hard yesterday or whatever. I usually respond to that one with like, just because I heard that voice, I'm going to do 2 more sets. Like, I'm actually going to do more. I'm going to walk an extra mile or an extra 10 minutes or whatever.
Yes.
So it's interesting because I think that when it's something that we have already come to peace with, or we know that we can overcome, the voice doesn't have as much power. Like this one was really weird for me yesterday.
Yes.
I honestly didn't know what to do with it. I was like, I've never experienced this like imposter syndrome to this degree before.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's something to look at.
Yeah. Okay. So earlier you talked about like doing things for yourself, like reading books and stuff like that. What book do you think? I'm assuming you read a book or self-educated yourself, right, on something to help make you feel better. What book do you think you read or podcast that you listened to that really started to open your eyes and search for the solution, I guess, to the way that you were feeling?
So honestly, I've read a lot of like mostly books on law of attraction and existentialism. So I really enjoy, one of my favorite books is The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. But I've also read like Louise Hay, Mike Dooley, Esther and Jerry Hicks. So a lot of books about that. It's really about, what I've learned is it's about framing. So that was my talk yesterday too in my breakout. I actually talked about, so again, it's a cliche, right? Life is 90%, or it's 10% what happens to you, 90% how you respond.
Yes.
Until you realize like the depth of what that means. Like, look, life is just life.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything's going to happen. You can't change what happens, but how you frame it in your head is how you're going to be able to either appreciate or get through something or trust the process. There's actually a story, maybe you've heard of it. Have you heard of the tale of the Taoist farmer? It's a parable.
I don't know if I have.
Okay, I'll tell it to you.
Yes,
it's my
please
favorite.
do.
I think of it all the time. Okay, so there's this Taoist farmer, and he lives in a small village. And one day his horse at his farm like breaks out of the fence and runs off. And the villagers are like, oh, how unfortunate. And he goes, maybe. And a couple days later, the horse comes back and he brought 5 wild horses with him. So now the guy has 6 horses. And the villagers are like, how fortunate, how lucky. And he goes, maybe. Well, his son goes out and is trying to break these wild horses one day. One of them, he kicks him and breaks his leg. And the villagers are like, that's horrible. And he goes, maybe.
Yeah.
And later that week, the government officials show up at the door to draft him for a war, but they can't draft him because he has a broken leg. And the villagers are like, how fortunate.
Yes.
And he goes, maybe. So it's just helped me realize that if we zoom in on one micro moment of our life, like when something bad is happening, we feel like that's our whole life at the moment. When when our heart is broken, we're just like, this is it for me.
Yeah.
We get hyper focused on these singular moments. But the reality is this: how many times have you been in love broke up, got divorced even, and you're so heartbroken, but then you found the love of your life.
Yes.
Or maybe you were shopping for a house and you had your heart dead set on this one, and you're like, that's the one, and it gets sold. And you're like, oh, right? Like that was the house. And then a month later, another house hits the market and you're like, I can't, but had I bought that other house and I missed out on this one, that would have been heartbreaking.
Yes.
Right? So I used an example. I actually zoomed in. I had a picture of, the Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. I zoomed in on this one little tree. And if you look at it, you're like, what is that? Is that an amoeba? Like, what is it? And I put it up on the screen without the big picture. I just put the tree up and I said, if I told you guys I painted this, would you be impressed? And everyone like looked around, they're like, no. And I go, do you even know what it is? And I'm like, if I told you this was a tree I painted, would you be impressed? And they're like, no. And then I turned it to the next slide and it was the Starry Night. And I was like, is this a masterpiece? Everyone's like, yeah, it's a famous masterpiece. And I zoomed in, I go, that's the tree. But if you just zoom in on this one little piece, that's like the ups and downs that make up the entire masterpiece of your life. So you have to understand that the big picture is a beautiful overall experience that includes the pieces that we don't think are good or bad, because those things, again, like the tale of the Taoist farmer, it's just a stepping stone to the next thing.
Yes.
So it's just our entire life is like a Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb trail. It's like, so this crumb sucked. Okay, but it's going to move to the next one,
Right. I love that. That is such a great story. And it's like, it always turns out to be like the best thing that has ever happened to us, right? Like at the moment, we think it's the worst thing and we can magnify it. And it turns out it can, for me, I can make any situation as good as I want or as bad as I want. And a lot of it has to do with my behavior. And my behavior has gotten me in the past. And it's like, I end up with what I call an emotional hangover, making what do they call it? An ant out of magnifying it like 10 times and blowing it so far out of proportion. Then the next day I end up with an emotional hangover. And it's like, looking back, it's like, dude, why did I handle it so poorly?
Right.
And then all of a sudden the check shows up in the mail or something. It's like, dude, like what a waste of energy. I showed my ass. Everybody thinks I'm an asshole. And it's like, how many times am I going to put myself in that position before I learn that it always works out?
Right.
Maybe not the way that I wanted it to, but the way that it's supposed to.
I think what happens is we try to rush getting out of the moment of uncertainty because it's painful. So we don't want to be uncomfortable. And that patience of like waiting to see, like something I always tell myself is there's always more to be revealed.
Yes.
When a situation is happening, it's really easy for us again to zoom in on it. And we're like, this is the situation and we're just stuck here. But the reality is swirling in the ethers, what I always say behind the scenes, the universe or God or whatever, is there's going to be new characters introduced to the situation, new changes, new facts, new opportunities, new information. You never know. And it might take a day. It might take a week. It might take a year. Right. So you have to really trust the process. Another cliche, but you have to realize like there's constantly things happening. If I plant a seed in the ground right now, I wouldn't dig it up tomorrow to see if it grew. I would have to just trust that I know if I put this seed in the ground and I add water and let sunlight, eventually something's going to grow.
Give it time.
Right. So you have to just like life. How arrogant is it of us to believe that we're controlling every single thing in our lives?
Right.
That's crazy talk.
I know it is.
Like, look at all the, even if I get super OCD and I try to hyper control every single iota of what's happening in my life, there's still going to be plane crashes and trucks. That's an extreme example, but I can't control what this guy over here, this man could trip me. Right. Are you going to trip me later? I don't know what's going to happen. Right.
He looks like a tripper.
He's probably not going to. He looks like he's pretty comfortable in his stool.
Yeah, that's true.
We just never know what's going to happen. Right?
No, we don't. And we can't control the situation. I think the sooner that we can learn to not get stressed over the small things, right? One of my shortcomings is that I'm a stuffer. Yeah. Right. So, and I call it the snowball effect, right? So the snowball starts up here. It's a real small snowball. By the time it gets to the bottom of the hill, it's just rolling me over. It's so huge and it rolls me over. Yeah. And the thing that I've had to learn to do over the years, and I'm not perfect at it, is to not stuff things. And a lot of times it's because I don't want you to know that I really don't know what I'm talking about or what I'm doing. So I'm afraid to ask questions. So I'll stuff that. Somebody said or did something that that hurt my feelings. I stuff that.
Yeah.
Like I'm stuffing all of these things. And all of a sudden I come home, my kids left their shoes on the floor.
Freak out.
I trip over it, and it's like I lose my mind. It's like I tend to take it out on those closest to me and those that I love the most.
I've noted there's a thing that's called the transference of anger. There's a little picture. It's actually from like the 50s or something, but it shows a boss yelling at the employee coming home and yelling at the wife yelling at the kid, and then the kid yelling at the dog. And that the exact same thing happens to me too. I think again, some of this goes into just how fucked up we are in interpersonal relationships to begin with, because like I could tell you for me, but I'm not special to it, but growing up in the household that I grew up in, there was no space for me to express my emotions. I wasn't even allowed to have them. So for me to like now in relationships with men, even in friendships, it's extremely painful, almost like scary. I shouldn't say painful. I'm terrified to bring up how I'm feeling because I'm afraid of a blow up or of being punished. Right. And it's funny. We attract the same, until we heal it, we attract the same type of situation. So we're also trained by other people who also have unhealed shit that they're, if we bring up a concern or something that we're feeling, they might act really defensively because they're insecure. And now we have this like, horrible kind of like a loop that we find ourselves in. So it takes
vicious cycle.
Exactly.
It really is. It really is. So one of the things that I've found that have helped me is to actually have like a support system and people that I can speak to that can relate to my craziness. Because there's certain people you can't, at least for me, I cannot share what actually goes on in my head with just anybody at times. So I have a group of people, and a lot of them are actually here with me today. And that's why I travel with these guys. These are my brothers. I know that they can see me at my worst. They can see me at my best. But yet tomorrow morning, they'll still support me. Right. And pick me up. And a lot of that, I need that. Because I can be my own worst critic. I can be down on myself, and they know it. They know when I'm off. You know what I mean? Like I need to surround myself around, and vice versa. He might have a moment, and it's like, it's okay, dude. Let's have a do-over. Let's do over.
I think also, so that reminded me of some relationships can be so healing. Like when I went through my divorce, the person that I dated like immediately after was the first time actually where I remember having to bring up a difficult emotion because I couldn't hide it. I couldn't hide it. I was in such a bad place. So when he would come over, it was like, I couldn't hide how down I was. Like I was really depressed. I was having panic attacks. It was just bad. So I remember I had to ask for space because I'm like, I don't know if I can like be doing this right now. And it was a difficult feeling to bring up. And the way that he responded to me was so compassionate and just calm. And I remember thinking like, I think I even said, I was like, we're not going to fight. And he goes, it doesn't have to be like that. We don't have to fight about it. And I'm like, oh my God. And just that one moment, I realized like, we can talk about things without fighting or like getting angry. And that changed it for me. I was like, oh my God, not everybody is going to be, it's not always going to be like that. So I think also when people are secure enough to hold space, which is another buzzword, but if somebody can hold space for you when you are just being like, this is how crazy I'm feeling right now. I'm like, the world is over for me. And they're just like there and they listen and you're like, I'm still okay. Am I still lovable? And they're like, yeah.
Do you still like me?
I'm like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, do you think I'm nuts? Because I'm also nuts.
No doubt. And I think, well, because you're driven and you're high performing. And again, I believe that your threshold for pain is much higher or greater than most people because of the things that you've gone through in your life. And it's a shame that you weren't allowed to experience those emotions. Like they took that away from you. Benny Fisher talked about that on the podcast before this one. And I've never heard it put that way. Like it was taken away from me. Like I wasn't allowed to act like that. I wasn't allowed to show, I wasn't allowed to cry. Because boys don't cry. Men don't cry. You know what I mean? I'm not allowed to cry. You know what I mean? And I did what I was told and I was speak when spoken to, all of those things that, a lot of us went through that as children that we thought was normal. And then we as we get older, it's like, then we actually start coming across normal people that, that don't need to argue or can sympathize for us when we're going through things and being there to support us,
Right.
right, and encourage us,
Yeah.
right. Isn't that it's so crazy how we've been able to callous ourselves, and it can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing,
Right.
you know what I mean. And we've learned to, and I feel like you're the same way, is to channel that energy, that negative energy, into positive energy,
Right.
and make like great things happen, and not allow other people around us to experience those pains that we've gone through. Like,
Right.
we do whatever we can do to try to impact people around us as positively as we possibly can.
Right.
Like, I want him living his best life. I want this isn't work.
Right.
We're not working right now.
It's creative. It's fun.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to keep saying that. Everybody at the shop's going to be like, I thought you guys said you were down there working. We are, but we're enjoying what we're
Right.
doing. And that's the environment I really want to be around today.
Yeah.
Like, and what's cool about it is we can design that for ourselves today. We don't have to live in that shit anymore.
Exactly.
We have a choice today, right? And we don't have to accept unacceptable behavior.
Yeah.
And how cool is that?
It is. And honestly, I think, I mean, I realized this, there came a turning point for me. I was telling you about the experience with my divorce, right?
Mhm.
And I've never experienced grief like that. I mean, it was like howling like a baby, crying in bed.
You were actually
daily,
allowed to do that. It was probably years of shit. And half of it probably had
Exactly.
nothing to do with that circumstance.
Exactly. And it was interesting afterward because while I was in it, like trying to process it, it took me so long to get to the other side. But eventually I had this epiphany one day, and I think I might have eaten some mushrooms or something, but I had this epiphany. I was like, holy crap, the fact that I'm so heartbroken, like the depth of grief that I'm experiencing and processing right now is actually a beautiful reflection of the capacity of my heart to love. And I was like, holy crap, and I actually felt gratitude for being able to feel that.
Yes.
And that was a huge turning point for me, because I'm like, wow, the fact that I can feel this bad, and I'm judging it, right? It's just an emotion.
Yeah, that'll pass.
Yeah, you have to, the opposite has to be true. Like, that's how guilty I was feeling, honestly, because I did love hard, and that's why I felt so down. So you have to, the other thing is, I think you can't come up with anything of value unless there's been pain. All value comes from solving a pain problem.
Of course.
Whether you're selling a product or you are gaining personal awareness or like self-awareness, or you're healing a wound
Right.
or an experience that you've had, like all value comes from solving pain.
Yes.
Yeah,
so for sure, through pain comes growth.
Right.
And unfortunately for me, 99% of the time, it's self-inflicted pain.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's not outside elements that doesn't create pain, a passing of a loved one or things like that. But for me, my experience teaches me.
Yeah.
Even though you told me not to do that 100 times, I'm still going to do it until I think it's not a good idea to do it.
Right.
It's not a good idea until I think it's a good idea, unfortunately. Right. And that's just the type of knucklehead that I am, that I have to try it and I have to experience it in order to believe it and experience that pain and then grow from that. And that's important and I guess as we get older and mature, it's like, we have to go through the things, and a lot of that stuff too, like you're sharing right now, you're able to help other women or people,
right?
Whether it be in our industry or a loved one or a family member, you have the empathy, right? Because you've experienced that pain, and I'm sure you don't want to see anyone else going through that pain, but you're able to share with them what you did to get through that stuff.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. So during those times, I always feel like I can access deep wisdom when I'm in those really painful spots, because if you don't you can either numb it out or you can just sit there with it. And I always I journal. I'm just like, what's going on here? And I write things out. So I actually have it's very small. I don't really do that much with it. I'll do more, but I have a channel that I made called Nirvana by Nature. And that's where as I was going through these things, I started making videos about like, hey, this is what I'm learning about grief, or like, this is what I'm learning about just taking one step forward or getting through these things. Right. And it's so interesting. Like just yesterday, I was in an Uber with a group of people, and one girl, I'd never met her before. And she turned around and she goes, your videos on your other channel, she's like, you don't understand how much it's helped me.
Wow.
And she's like, seriously, like you need to make more of those. And I've had clients too that have gotten on and they're like, your Nirvana by Nature stuff is like exactly what I need to hear.
Wow.
When I hear it, I'm like, man, but it's interesting when I'm in a good place. It's like, I can't even conjure up the message for that because everything's fine,
Right.
but when you're in pain, you're like, okay, I got to figure out how to get through this. How can I give this meaning? And I think that's really what it comes down to. Pain is only pain if you don't attach meaning to it. But if you can see why you're going through something or see the value in it, now you actually have something to say and share.
Awesome.
And everybody goes through it. So it's like, man, if you can share a nugget of wisdom for somebody, that one moment of hope where it's like, hey, just so you know, you are going to get through this. Here's how I know.
Yeah.
And you can share a parable or a personal story or make a cliche actually mean something to somebody in that moment. That's the value right
The
there.
vulnerability that you're exposing of yourself has impacted others. Mission completed, and you thought it was just an outlet for you.
Yeah.
Probably at the time.
Exactly.
Right. But really, at the end of the day, you were helping other people.
Right.
How cool is that?
Even just what, like you said, even one person,
Yes.
knowing how bad of a spot I was in
Mhm.
during those times,
Mhm.
to know that one person didn't think about like not waking up tomorrow because they got a glimmer of hope from a video
Mhm.
is like, that's incredible.
Yeah. Now, was that a YouTube channel?
It is a YouTube channel. And then I also have an Instagram.
Okay. And
Yeah.
it's called, say it one more time.
Nirvana by Nature.
Nirvana by Nature.
Yes. And it actually has a double meaning because the state of nirvana in Buddhism is like not wanting anything, like you're content. It's contentment, right?
Mhm.
Like the ultimate contentment. So it had two meanings. One, by nature means it's actually our nature. Like pure consciousness is just isness, for lack of better terms. There's no good or bad. It's like, here we are, we're just alive, and so reaching that state of nirvana is like your actual birthright and it's your natural place. It's just that our mind, one of my favorite quotes is by William Shakespeare, and he says, nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so. So it's getting back to that natural state. But then the other thing is another cliche, but nature teaches us everything we need to know about being alive. Seasons, right? Like sometimes we're in a season of life, we're just down, and that's your winter.
Of course.
And then there's the season of renewal. Okay, there's a new thing happening, whether it's falling in love again or a new opportunity in your business or a new bit of inspiration. Then you have summer where things are good and it's growing and things are cranking. And then you have a season of fall to harvest, before you go back into either a resting phase or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much, or like even planting a seed, like we talked about earlier, there's so much happening beneath the surface. We just see dirt, but it's like there's roots growing and there's something sprouting here, and it takes weeks before we see something. So so nirvana by nature is really like nirvana learned through nature, with patience and trust and growth and seasons and all of those lessons that we learned. So that's where the name came from.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Well, Becca, I think this is at a good juncture right now to wrap this thing up. I appreciate your patience. Because we kind of were missing each other here a little bit.
It's really okay.
You have been on my list, just so you know, you've been on my list to reach out to you for a minute. With everything going on and honestly, a little bit of fear. I'm a fear-driven person, mostly healthy fear nowadays, which could be another topic that we could talk about as healthy fears.
For hours.
Yes, for hours. But I'm so super glad that Mike reached out to you. I really regret missing your stage time yesterday. Did you say you had a breakout today?
It was yesterday.
Shoot.
It was,
okay.
Yeah.
Damn it. We got to start scheduling these things. Like I miss Patrick Bet Davis. Like, damn it. That was probably a really good one.
It actually was really good. To be honest, I didn't know who he was before this talk, but my friend texted me and was like, you're going to be at an event with Patrick. He's like, I love that guy.
I know.
So I was like, I got to make sure that I see his talk. He was an amazing speaker.
He is
powerful.
I read I don't know how many books he has, but I read Your Next 5 Moves by him. I read it 3 times.
Really?
It was so good. What sucked was I couldn't find another book.
Yeah.
So I read it again.
Love that.
And I heard it so much more stuff this time around than I did the second time around. But dude, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Because we all here admire what you're doing for our industry with all of the other things that you do besides the things that we talked about today. You do so much training and like helping our industry be a better place than it was than when you found it. And I feel like there's a huge group of us, whether it be the Tim Browns, the Benny Fishers, the Adam Sands. I mean, you, Becca Switzer, I feel like and I hope that I can be included in that like we're changing the industry,
Yeah.
right? Like making it a better place than it was when we found it, and getting rid of that stigma, right? Of the roofing contractors, they don't call, they don't show up, they're
Right.
just the dregs of society and things like that. But with people like you and the marketing teams that are out there now, and the tools and the apps and everything that we have today to make this a better place.
Yeah.
You are one of the pioneers.
Oh, thank
So
you.
thank you for your work. Thank you for your compassion for our industry. And without people like you, we wouldn't have platforms like this to do what we do because of really smart people like you. So thank you.
Thank you, Ty. I appreciate that.
Thank
I've
you.
really enjoyed this.
Yes, I'm
and
glad you came on.
Conversations.
Yes,
that
our
everybody
previous
missed.
conversations,
really
you guys
good.
should have recorded it because they were bangers.
It really was. We covered some deep stuff.
We did.
Don't you love when you meet somebody and off the bat you just instantly are talking about something super deep? You're like,
yes,
this was nice.
It was nice.
So where are you from?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
When did you get in?
Boring, uncomfortable stuff. I guess.
Yeah, and I'm just like, can I just?
Yeah, I'll take this real quick.
Yeah, my mom's calling me. No, she's not. She's never going to call me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. We'll definitely reach back out to you to come back on and probably talk about what it is that you do.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You know what I mean? And because now we know kind of how you got here and what makes you driven and where you get your compassion and why you want to help so many people in our industry. So super cool.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for another episode of Behind the Tool Belt. And we appreciate everybody and have a good one. Thank you.
Bye.